So I want to talk a little bit about non-contradiction again, but from the point of view of how I use it, the sense in which I endorse non-contradiction. And I think it'll give an idea of why the way I use non-contradiction as a tool, because remember, my main point in all of this is that all of these ideas are just programs that we use. We bring that program to mind while we're processing information. So, okay, basically it's like this. I take it that epistemologically all we have is a stream of imagery, the stream of consciousness. I call all of those perceptions, including dream perceptions. I know some of you, when you hear the word perception, you're thinking specifically sense perception. But I'm talking about this stream of imagery. That's all we get, okay? Now, the way I use non-contradiction is, okay, some of these perceptions or some of these images are different than others, right? The sense perceptions are different from the imaginary perceptions, and the way in which they're different is that they're consistent, okay? In other words, the law of non-contradiction applies to them. And this is what I was getting at with taking a quantum perspective on non-contradiction. Now, the quantum, as I've used quantum mechanics to talk about the fact that in the material world there actually can be simultaneous contradictions. We can say that those are really in separate universes, but the universes are interacting. So we can also call, the group of these universes, one universe, because the things are still interacting. They're not entirely separate. So the quantum mechanics, denies that in the world, actually, that this non-contradiction always applies. But it doesn't contradict that it always applies when we take a perception. Anytime in a quantum system, when you take a perception, you have to interact with that quantum system, and it'll tell you one state or the other. You will perceive and measure one state, not the other state. So the law of non-contradiction still gets to apply to our sense perceptions. Now, since the law of non-contradiction is how we notice one perception is sensual and another one isn't, when we have an experience of something that's discontinuous or self-contradictory or contradictory, we use the non-contradiction principle to say, well, that's not the part that's coming from the senses. That's not the part that's related to this material world. We define the material world in terms of these sense perceptions. So we also end up getting the idea that the material world follows non-contradiction. But it really only turns out that it follows non-contradiction when we're looking. Okay, when we're not looking, it looks like there can be contradictory states simultaneously in the universe. So I use this non-contradiction principle to tell the difference between sense perceptions and non-sense perceptions. So you see, it can't apply always. If it applied always, I'd have no way to tell the difference. But it doesn't apply always. And when it doesn't apply to a perception, to an image, to a set of images or a stream of images, then I'm going to end up saying, well, that's the imaginary stuff. So I don't want to say, oh, it always applies, and the imaginary stuff doesn't exist, because the imaginary stuff does exist, okay? It exists. It's right here. I can see that it exists. I'm interacting with love or the liar's paradox, and it doesn't apply. And I'll have to say, well, then it's not a part of this material world as defined by that world, defined by the consistency of my sense experiences, okay? So I use non-contradiction in order to sort things out. And the things that non-contradiction does apply to do get a certain amount of reality to them. I get a certain faith because I've defined the material world in terms of consistent sense perceptions. So when I have consistency and things follow non-contradiction, then they go into this category of the material world. So I do end up with a material world that more or less follows non-contradiction. But the quantum curveball in there is that it's only applying at those moments of perception. It's not applying in between. When nothing is interacting with some system, it can have these contradictory states. When I look at the perceptions at the end, where it does apply again, I can tell that there was a period when it didn't apply. And so this is what the two-slit experiment does. It's a way of showing that even though I have to look, my perceptions, the non-contradiction will always apply, I can still see the impact of there having been a period when non-contradiction didn't apply. So yeah, I'm a big fan of non-contradiction, but I want to use it as a practical tool. And for it to be used as a practical tool, I can't fool myself and say it always applies, because I'm trying to see when it applies. And I do give a higher ranking in terms of epistemology when it does apply, for very practical reasons.